Dr. Vanessa, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you?
I am brilliant, and thank you for having me on.
So good to have you. I've been a long-term admirer of you and the work that you put out in the world. And I love this one phrase that I've seen in your work, which is that you help big people understand little people. I'd just love to know a little bit more about your heart work.
Yeah. So, I came into this gig as a psychologist thinking that I had it kind of all down, like I'd studied at university for 13 long years. I spent a year studying for my licensing exams. Like I was going to show up and I was going to be really good. And then I became a mother. I was like, what is even happening? This does not translate. All of this sort of head knowledge doesn't always, infuse the being and then allow it to come out in the moments when it really matters. I
Mm.
couldn't, I have this beautiful friend that said the longest road we'll ever travel is the one from the head to the heart. I just felt like I wasn't landing. And so I had to figure out what was going on. And as I observed, the many families that I get to support in the work that I do and observed my own process as a parent, I realized that we actually have to make sense of the hearts of the little people. We have to
Mm.
make sense of the hearts of ourselves. And then we have to bring all of that together in order to be able to show up as the big people that are going to create a safe path for them to journey along and become all that they were intended to be. Well, we become all that we were intended to be.
I love that. Thank you. And I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I a really pivotal moment in my life, I had my first leadership role at the police, in my former career. And I became a parent in the same year. And like that was like the greatest thing that ever happened to me because I really learned the fact that there is no difference between leadership, parenting. Parenting is the greatest leadership example. And I think parenting is just leadership in the home. And I'd just love to dive in, have some conversations around what it means to be a leader, be a parent. That self leadership that you talk about.
Yeah. And so when we are leading, we have to be able to create an experience for the person who's counting on us to be in the lead
Mm.
that has them feeling safe to accept our charge. If they're not safe to lean in to our provision, if we don't create that safety and the dynamic with them, then they're not going to lean in. And what I see, for children who are leaned in to their people, their big people, be it their parent, their teacher, their caregiver, whoever the big person is,
Mm.
for a child who's leaned in and made the connection. I grew up a competitive figure skater, shocking but true. And so I'm used to being in a partner hold on the ice, in the ice dance. And when you're connected to your partner, the hold is firm and solid, then the partner can lead you anywhere because when your partner moves, you follow them when the connection exists. But let's say now you've become a really yally shouty parent because your fuse is short, you haven't filled up your own tank, you're carrying forward wounds from your past, whatever it is, you've become this yelly shouty parent. So we want the child to lean in, but you're busy barking at them. This child's not a fool. From knee high to grasshopper, this child's going to know to keep themselves safe, they need to move away. And so now you're like, hey, get over here because you want them to come with you. And they're like, oh no, the
Mm.
connection is broken. The other side of that is instead of being a yelly shutty parent, if you become a spineless jellyfish parent and you're
Mm.
just kind of not there. You're not showing up with expectations and rules and norms and boundaries and all of these lovely things for your kids. And so they go to lean in, but you're all loosey goosey like this and they fall flat in their face. And then they're like, yeah, I'm not doing that again. Check it.
Mm.
I'm out. Right? And so either way, you don't have the connection and now you can't be in the lead. And the truth is, I'm speaking about this in languaging that plays into the big person, little person relationship.
Mm.
But if you tweaked the languaging a little bit, that is true of every relationship that we exist in as human beings.
Mm. Yeah, you shared a post recently which I added to my story, and it was about this sense of unconditional love, and I think that transcends the home and extends to the workplace, and leadership extending this unconditional love to the people that work there. But let's save that for a whole nother day. What is it about unconditional love that kids need?
Mm. Kids need to know that they are loved for the very ones that they are, that no matter how they show up, there is nothing wrong about
Mm,
them. They need to know that we can see through the facade of the mess that sometimes settles into life, that we can see through that facade to their truth, always. And when we make children wrong for being children, we make the 2-year-old wrong for being a biter. We make
mm,
the 6-year-old wrong for sometimes having tantrums like a 3-year-old.
mm,
We make our teenagers wrong for seeking to emerge and explore and, try on their independence.
mm,
When we make our children wrong for the natural presentation of development as they journey along life's path, they internalize the message. And we wonder then why we in our adult populations, have uh, really a pandemic
mm,
of mental
mm,
health issues,
mm.
why divorce rates around the world are approaching 60%. We wonder why all of these things happen. And it's because our children have onboarded messaging from very young that does not serve a love based existence. It
Mm.
serves a fear based existence. And we see how that translates. And so we really want to make sure that children are never made wrong for the very ones that they are, which is completely different from having
Yes.
boundaries and holding on to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And, just reflecting, I have an 8-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. And my son, curious as can be, he's got a million and one questions, often at bedtime. And everything in me wants to nurture that to the point where I have no more capacity to answer a single question. And I know that that's on me. And then my daughter, well, she is Moana, like she is courage personified. And it's just like I have to have faith that this is going to be good characteristic trait for life, and that and to be the best dad I can be, I need to nurture that and not. But it's tricky, right? It is tricky.
It is.
How would you describe parenting pop culture?
Hmm. We will parent as we were parented,
Mm,
which means that the pop culture of our child raising world right now is very much infused with antiquated biases from generations gone by.
mm,
And so I think that you would probably be hard pressed in the year 2020, going on 2021, to find, a parent today who would say to you, I really believe that children ought to be seen and not heard.
mm,
People aren't saying that nowadays, but they behave that way towards their children. We all
mm.
do. And I'm not, saying I'm holier than thou. We all have that in us because we have all come from generations of parenting where those kinds of thoughts were a very dominant part of how we were raised. And we know that percolates through time and becomes transferred intergenerationally up until present day. And so we really do need to be mindful about, where it is that we have come from, how our parents were parented, how our parents' parents were parented, and how that's continuing to show up right now. And the dominant pop culture of today's parenting is still what I will call behaviorist in mentality, which flies completely in the face of everything that we
Mm,
know from the science of child development.
mm,
And so we're at this curious sort of, tension filled time where we have the research, which is, at this point, we're about 20 years deep in that research, and it's pretty irrefutable as far as the importance of connection and compassion-based approaches to parenting.
mm,
We have that juxtaposed with the bias that has crept forward, and the two are at complete odds with each other.
mm. Yeah, when you put it like that, and I guess, I use my own example. You talked about divorce earlier. I was raised single mum, the epitome of optimism, like worked several, she's my hero. Um, but that's left me without a male role model in my own parenting. So I'm a parent now, and I'm sure there'll be a number of men listening to this who find themselves as parents, want to be the best parents they can be, but they're winging it like most parents, but they are proper winging it because they've got no male role model to draw upon, whether that be positive or negative. What advice do you have to men that maybe don't have that in their lives to
Mhm.
make them or help them be the best parent they can be?
I immediately think of a couple of things. The first thing is that for all of time, parents were never have meant to go it alone,
Mm,
and that it really does take a village. And even if you did grow up in a household with a single mama parent, um, to consider who were the mentors that showed up in your life along the way. Maybe it was, a coach on a
mm,
team that you were on. Maybe it was one of the elders at your church. Maybe it was a neighbor in your community whose, lawn you mowed once a week. Who was it that showed up? And what were you, because nothing's random, those people showed up in your life for a reason. So what was it that you were meant to pick up from your interactions with them? And so I would encourage you to think about, did you absolutely have a complete absence of any kind of male role model or mentor? The other thing is that I have increasingly been thinking through the idea of, moms and dads, male and female, the different roles that we have as from a social kind of space, often
mm,
seen males and females occupy in the lives of our children. And I was listening to somebody speak recently, a couple years back, who talked about the mother figure in a child's life, or the person with the mother energy. And I was like, oh, that just bent my brain.
mm,
And so our parent child relationships, and so now you're a dad, you grew up in a
mm,
single parent household with your mom. When you came into your role as a father, into the intimate space of the parent child relationship, there was something in that that would have been very familiar to you because you have previously existed in the intimate space of a parent child relationship.
mm,
It doesn't actually matter whether it was a male or a female that created that relationship with you. They gave you the template for how to do relationship. Now you will embody the template in your being, and then it will come out of you present day as a dad in ways that are authentic to your form, which may not be exactly the way that it played out for you as a child.
mm,
But learning how to engage with a child so that they can trust you, learning how to engage with the child so that they know you've got their back and you're picking up what they're putting down, and that you will be moved on their behalf in a way that is very fierce to stand up for what they need, to stand up for what is right for them, to ensure that their world goes round in the way that nature
mm,
intended for them. You're going to do all of those things because you had a mother, or for some of your listeners, because you had a father, or for some of your listeners who didn't have either,
mm,
because you had somebody show up and do that for you. And when we look into the resilience literature in the field of child development, what we see over and over and over again, study after study after study after study, is that it only takes one.
mm,
And so we don't need to be from a place of feeling like we didn't get enough or feeling less than. We don't need to be too mired in that concern, because actually, if you had one person show up, you got the neurological wiring and the emotional template to show up in your adult life for the children that will then depend on you, and like absolutely nail it.
mm. I love your passion for this. I could speak to you all day. So we know that connection is important. And here's the thing, there's a lot of men out there that can't connect with themselves, let alone,
Yes.
their own emotions. Where do they start?
Yeah.
Where do they start to be able to connect with a child before they can even connect with themselves?
Yeah. And I want your male listeners to really think about what was their experience as a child that resulted in them having to separate from themselves. And
Mm.
it would have sounded like um, things like, I'll give you something to cry about.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
live in Canada, and a lot of our kids grow up playing hockey.
Hmm.
And it's common knowledge that when you're playing hockey, especially when I was a kid, and I would go out and, watch the community hockey games in the town that I grew up in, where if a kid checked you into the boards and really hurt you during your shift, you get his number.
Mm.
You wipe your tears. Don't be a little girl. You get his number and you get out there and you get him back next time. We got no time for crying, right?
Mm.
And yet we know from the science of child development that our boys are actually born emotionally and otherwise far more sensitive than our girls.
Wow.
And because of how our parents were socialized and how their parents were socialized, what we've done to our boys is we've taken all of the emotionality that exists in them as children and we've
Mm.
told them to stuff that.
Mm.
And then we wonder why they grow up to be adults who are like, emotions? I don't have emotions,
Yeah.
or I don't have emotions until I do. And now we've got anger problems and other kinds of things presenting. So, what I want for all your dads to know, first and foremost, you do have this in you. You are a social species by design, which means you are wired from the moment you were created in utero. You were wired to enter into the parent child relationship and know how to do it. So you do have it. It's just that it gets a little buried in the leftover effects of how you were parented when you were young. The child that was told, I'll give you something to cry about.
Mm.
You wipe your tears, get his number, and get him back next shift. Suck it up, buttercup. Take it on the chin, princess. For all the
Yep.
little boys who are now daddies that got told that, I want you to know that that little boy is still inside of you and he's hurting.
Mm.
And so there's something about doing our work as grown-ups where you have to go back to that inner child. There's a beautiful book by a man named John Bradshaw, and the book is called Homecoming. Have you read it?
I haven't, no.
Oh, it's such a life-changing, mind-blowing kind of a read. Um, and in that book, he walks you through how to get connected to
Mm.
that part of yourself. You are all the ages that you have ever been. And so,
Mm.
in the act of growing up your own children, what will happen is you will feel like your inner child starting to jump around, and you'll be like, what is even happening? It's very uncomfortable,
Mm.
right? And that's the
Yeah.
invitation. It's the greatest gift of parenthood.
Wow. It reminded me, as you said that, a video that I saw of you speaking at Kerwin Ray's event. It was, you asked such a question that I've never heard before. You were, um, how old are you when you're feeling that? And I was like, whoa, like just to shift that perspective, like how old are you when you're feeling that? Because, so often we think about being present in the moment and our feeling we're feeling now. And it's just like, whoa, like that blew my mind. That blew my mind, that question.
I love that. I don't know who first said it, but the quote is, all overreaction is an age regression.
Hmm.
So anytime you're like at your kids, then the question is, oh, sweetie, where did you just go? Like, that's what I want to know from that parent. Where did you just go? Because I know you're not here in your 36-year-old self.
Mm.
Your 36-year-old self is wise and stunning and intuitive and so available to this. But your 3-year-old self, now 3-year-olds don't do such a hot job of growing up little children. So here's your 3-year-old self, come out to play. And
Mm.
let's connect with why you've gone back to that headspace in this
Mm.
moment when your child has done that thing. It's also really interesting. My boys are now 13 and soon to be 17. I don't even know how it happened. And I have observed in myself in the space of being their parent, that I often, in terms of my reactions, when I'm, not really pulled together, it does happen, that I have become the age that they're at. So there's something about, my son at 9 that took me back to myself at 9. Or there's
Mm,
something about, something that's going down for them at 5 that takes me back to that. What was going
mm.
on for me when I was 5? Oh, look how I'm recreating that in my present day life.
Yeah, it's brave to look at that, isn't it? And, there's a number of traits my son displays. Not sitting still, bouncing his legs up and down. And I'm just like, I've been with my wife since I was 15, so since school. So
Wow.
she knew me as a kid. You know what I mean? And she's like, "How dare you say that to him?" She's like, "That's you." so I've got this accountability right in my face, and it's like, ah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, you said something earlier about the two sides of parenting. Not being too strict, not being too soft, and I talk about leading with love. And coming from a police background, I'm really clear that love is tough, not tough love, but love is tough. We love first, and then we earn the right to challenge, call people out to who they're supposed to be. And I think Love Tough really represents your book title, which is Discipline Without Damage. I'd
Mm.
love to know what are some of the core key principles around discipline without damage.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I wrote that book. And if you don't read the subtitle, um, or if you do, you might be misled into believing that the book is about, having well behaved kids. And the truth is, although that may be a fruit of your labor, the book is not so much about children's behavior, it's about grown ups' behavior. And that we must shine the light on our own behavior first, because children will be children. Growth will happen. Development will proceed. Maturation is a force. I double dog dare you to get in the way of it. It's going down, right? And
Mm,
so kids are going to take care of their business and they're going to move through the developmental trajectory that they're meant to be on. So we can just like really settle into some peace around that. The challenge is that we get all up in our business and we start to
mm.
react. And so, um, love is tough. Is that what you said? Loving
Love
tough?
Tough, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And it's about holding on to ourselves as grown-ups so that we can show up and create that beautifully balanced energy of being firm and kind at the peak of
Mm,
the parenting mountain,
mm,
and step in with swagger, with leadership, with love, with compassion, in order to be the answer that our children are needing for us to be for them. A lot of people hear me talk about how important relationship is, and it really is what makes the world go round for all of us. And sometimes they read into that you're never meant to, have your children be upset.
mm,
You're never meant to find them crying because of something that you've said to them. But this is the seedy underbelly of thinking about compassionate parenting. We are not here to make our children happy. We are here to create a an opportunity for them to grow in
mm,
exactly the way that nature intended.
mm.
And so sometimes they're not going to be happy with the firm side of the mountain,
And
right?
sometimes you can't protect them from everything either. They're gonna
Right.
get their first heartbreak. They're gonna get
You're
their,
right. Yes.
it's yeah. I in the past have talked about my own approach to parenting as a little bit like Crush from Finding Nemo. Do you remember the big turtle? So the big turtle in Finding Nemo. So his little turtle, he goes outside the current, and Nemo's dad has an absolute panic. It's like, no. And Crush is like, dude, chill out. And then what the kid does is he gets himself back in, and then he's so proud. He's like, Dad, did you see me? Did you see me? And I think that's kind of what it means, isn't it? Is to be on hand if something dangerous is about to happen.
Yeah.
But we need to let them try and figure it out.
Okay, so that's my very most favorite like analogy for what it is to parent from that
Mm,
kind of space that I've ever heard. I love it. It's a little like you have to be both safe harbor and launching pad.
Mm,
And, just kind of dance yourself in between those two spaces all the time.
the one thing, and I'm always a learning leader, and I think the one thing I have to reflect on through seeing your content is, because I had a independent mum, I really value independence.
Yes.
And I think, I can't remember the quote that you shared, but there's something around, you know just not retiring too early.
Mhm.
What does that mean?
You know, so my boys who are teenagers now, and they are, I mean, they're giant. They're 6'2", couple 100 pounds. They look like adults. They behave in a lot of ways like adults. They're very independent. My eldest son, who's grade 11 this year, like he just kind of lives his life. We're still very connected, but I don't have to check in on his homework. I don't have to do those things. He's really kind of emerged into this wonderfully capable young man. And yet, he's 17. He's not 37. He's still a kid. He's still finding his way. He still has, those moments when it just gets too big and overwhelming, and he needs to kind of, it's like they have one arm reaching forward into the independence of adulthood, but they have this other arm in a yearning kind of way, reaching back or just checking to make sure you're still there, to be that soft landing for when things go a little bit sideways. And so it's a tempting thing when we see them walking and talking like adults to be like, okay, cool, they got this.
Yeah.
But my invitation is, don't retire too soon. They really do need you. The human brain is not done growing, in fact, until somewhere in the mid to late 20s. And we know that that brain grows best in the context of relationship. And so
Mm,
our children really need for us to continue to show up in very present and concrete ways, to be incredibly available to them so that they get what they need. My partner's adult son, he's 21 now, is home for the holidays from university, and because of COVID has to quarantine in our Lane house for 2 weeks before we get to spend any real time with him. And I was saying all of yesterday, I didn't even get to see Ben the whole day because he just kind of, there's a washroom that he gets to use in the house. And every now and then he brings the food tray in and drops it off, and then, creeps back out of the house. And so you have to be kind of hanging out in the
mm,
kitchen kind of hub of the house if you're going to lay eyes on him and get a moment to have a connection. You've got to show up for work, moms and dads, whether you're put to work or not. Never retire too soon. We have to be very available to our children right on up through adolescence.
mm. Thank you for the constant reminder, and it's a call to action. It's a call to action for me especially, and because I know the value I have of independence, and I have to slowly unlearn and know that that's about me. And yeah, it's really powerful. I'm really grateful for your time, your heart, your energy. Like, I've loved this conversation. Like I said, I could spend all day asking my curious questions, but I respect your time. And I just love to know what the phrase always better than yesterday means to you.
We're on a journey, all of us. And it is my heartfelt belief, especially after coming through, my own dark night of the soul,
Mm,
that we are never one step behind or one step in front of where we are meant to be. We are meant to be exactly in this moment on this day.
mm,
And as the journey goes, we're always stepping forward. We don't need to have that be connected to a certain form or a certain outcome. That in the act of being alive, in the act of being courageous enough to be human, we're
mm.
always stepping forward, which means that the journey continues, the heart beats on, and it leads us to better tomorrows, because that's the trajectory, that's the contract that we signed.
Love that. I love that. Um, would you do us the honor and the privilege of leaving us with a final thought from your good self?
Yeah, you really do have this in you. I think so many of us question that, and we find ourselves wondering, do we need to consult all the experts? Do we need to read all the books? Why is my kid behaving this way? Oh my God, what does that say about me? And if we could just have all the parents in the land know, You have got this. You
Mm,
have so got this. And in the act of landing in that kind of a confident headspace and heart space for yourself, it will allow you to step in with that kind of swagger that your children are looking to you to have. And if we could have just one generation of big people show up for the little people in that kind of heart centered way, it is my enduring belief that we would change the world. So I'll see
mm,
you on the road.
mm. I'm just going to let that simmer. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate you.
Thank you. I love being here.